Hey everybody, Jimmy Lefebvre here with the Can Survive Walk 2018, where we are heading from Grande Prairie, Alberta, all the way to just outside of St. Louis, Prince Edward Island. According to my Google map, we've got about 5,716 kilometers to track. Give or take 100 kilometers or so, depends on how our route adjusts or changes along the way. But today we have the absolute pleasure of talking with Denise Castonguay from Canada Gives, a fantastic organization that we've partnered up with as well in order for the fundraising and the donations and such on what we're trying to accomplish and what we're doing with this fundraising initiative and how the monies are going to be distributed going forward here into the future. So welcome, Denise. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking some time out of your day and talking to the audience and talking to everybody here. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you, Jimmy. We're doing great here at Canada Gives. We love what we do, so we appreciate your invitation to talk about it.
Well, thank you for joining us. So, can you give us a little bit of feedback, a little bit of background, I suppose, not feedback, but a little bit of background on yourself, on Canada Gives, on kind of the whole thought behind it, and what how it all came about.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for asking. I started Canada Gives in 2005. We went to CRA to register, and after 11 months they granted us registration, and so we started really actively in 2006. And the motivation for that was I had been at different areas in my career, but the most recent one prior to Canada Gives was in financial services. And I wanted to use that experience and make a contribution to the not-for-profit sector by really helping people to feel comfortable that their donations were, especially big donations that they wanted to set aside and to disperse over time to charities, would be managed and administered professionally, at the same standards that their investment money was managed, but in a way that would relieve them of the onerous side of it and let them feel comfortable that it was well managed, and as they decided to give it away over time, that it would be there and it would grow if it could, and it could be dispersed without them being burdened by all of the legal and accounting and administrative challenges that there exist with foundations.
Absolutely, there's quite a few rules that CRA has put into place, and for good reason, for foundations and for charitable giving. Absolutely.
Well, for good reason, yes, but and there are many complexities in the not-for-profit sector that people aren't aware of, and ignorance is no excuse sometimes for doing things, and we don't want people to be burdened by that. We want them to enjoy their giving and to feel good about their giving and to engage with charities and get all the satisfaction and impact that they can without worrying about getting into trouble with making mistakes.
Absolutely. So Canada Gives, in essence, takes all that off the table, takes all that concern, takes all that challenge, takes all that pressure, so to speak, off the table, and looks after things, make sure the money's managed properly, make sure everything's up to speed with CRA, make sure CRA is happy with all of that sort of stuff, and still with the intention of, I suppose, depends on how certain foundations or certain individuals decide they want to divide out that money, but this could be something that carries on for generations in a sense.
It could be, and we find that philanthropy is something that's very personal to people and to their families, and everybody's actually quite different, and so we like to accommodate whatever your individual goals and objectives are with your charitable giving, and just take away the dull side of it. We are essentially administrators for people that decide to set up a foundation, and so we act as your sort of outsourced staff and your outsourced back office and take away the burden of administration and reporting and all the compliance duties. So that you can focus on raising the money that you want to do and giving it to charity the way that you'd like to do that.
That's fantastic. I think that's extremely well said. At the end of the day, the administration piece can turn into a fairly daunting and overwhelming thing if a person's not on top of it. I know I looked into it myself previously on setting up a foundation on our own, and it was a very large undertaking, along with some fairly large regulations and rules and certain things like that really add on top of being a very big task. So that's fantastic that you guys are able to do that, and I'm sure you've got it streamlined to the point where it's very, very simplistic on your end as far as for clients and people to work with you. Is that correct?
Yes, we do, and thank goodness for technology, because that makes life a lot easier for most of us. And we have some wonderful support, with the legal and accounting professions that have been there for us for many years now. So yes, after time, it becomes second nature, but it takes a little while
Fantastic.
to get there.
Absolutely. That's fantastic, Denise. So why was it that you decided to venture away from the financial services industry and get into and set up Canada Gives?
Well, the firm that I had been working with was really a high quality firm. They had a great culture to them and high standards in their service and in their professionally in every way, but they were sold and things change. And so I looked at, combining what my network was, what my skill set was, what contribution I could make professionally was where my heart and my interests were. And that was in making a contribution myself to the not-for-profit sector. So sort of taking the value that I could bring from an experience point of view into where my values and my heart was. So it was a combination of professional and personal motivation that brought me here. But I had been in the mutual fund industry and met the president of Fidelity Mutual Funds. And Fidelity in the US were, if not the biggest, certainly the biggest momentum behind this donor-advised fund movement. And I had met the president there, who was a Canadian and had moved back to Canada, so I was fortunate enough to have some time with him. And he shared with me how the donor advice fund momentum was going and how it had started really as just an ability to pool money together from their partners, and then ultimately they offered that service to other people. And the success in the States was appealing. There was obviously a need for it. The administration behind the scenes is not unlike a mutual fund where you have a registered entity with individual unit holders that all participate and are able to participate on a bit grander scale than they could necessarily afford to with a smaller amount of money. So, the principles behind it were not unlike the mutual fund industry with which I was familiar, and I kind of took it from there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. So let's just dive into that a little bit just for a couple seconds, just so that people are aware of what that all involves. You mentioned donor advised fund.
Right.
So under my understanding of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm outside of what it falls under, but let's say for an example, we'll use ourselves as an example for that. A donor advised fund in a sense is the money comes in from us or from an event we do or from some sort of fundraising or whatever that comes into, perhaps from a donation from a family member passing away or
right.
Something along those lines. But the funds come in, and then that donor advised fund, what happens with that is then us as a contributor gets to decide where those funds are distributed within the parameters, obviously, of CRA. That has to go to a registered charity or a non-for-profit, or what are the specifics that the money has to go to?
Well, just to give you an idea of the flow of money, so essentially what Canada Gives itself is a public foundation and a registered charity. And what we've done is set up our purpose with CRA to give money to any qualified donee, which includes every registered charity in Canada and some additional organizations that qualify under CRA's definition. So by offering our registration to you, Jimmy, and to others, you can set up a donor advised fund under our umbrella so that any money that is set up for your donor advised fund is held separately in an account that is only your account. On our books, it's called a restricted fund, so that it doesn't mingle with our general operating money. It doesn't mingle with any other donor advised fund. It's all held separately for you. Anybody can make a donation to that, whether it's friends, family, fundraising events. But you who have set it up have all the decision-making privileges on that. So you decide how much money to give away, which charities get it, when you want to give it away. Anything that's held there that isn't dispersed immediately is invested, so that ideally you generate some additional money that's added to your foundation. We call them foundation accounts, these donor advised funds, because they are a legal structure that creates a foundation for you. So anybody can make a donation into your donor advised fund, but you, because you set it up, make all the decisions on how that money is managed and given away. So for us then, we oversee that. We essentially monitor that to make sure your choices are compliant with CRA rules, but we put no restrictions on them, so you can give it away whenever you want to whomever you want. We just make sure that they're qualified under CRA rules. And we do all the processing for you, all the behind the scenes administration work to do that.
Gotcha. So Canada Gives make sure that the money goes to specific organizations that are able to accept that money. So it can't just go and flow out to, Bob, Joe, and
Right.
anybody else in a sense. So it
Yeah.
has to specifically go to somebody. Now that's that's a registered charity that's registered in Canada, you said, and a few other qualifying entities as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So any registered charity means they have a charitable registration number. So one thing that people aren't always aware of is that there are almost as many not-for-profit organizations that aren't registered charities. So we have to make sure that when you are asking to give money to an organization that they are actually a registered charity. And if they're not, then maybe we can find a route for you to support that program under the umbrella of a registered charity. However, in addition to Canadian registered charities, other qualified donees include municipalities, provincial and federal government agencies. So sometimes they can be avenues to flow gifts to the United Nations. So, and every U.S. university, almost every U.S. university is a qualified donee. So there are a number of organizations in addition to Canadian registered charities that you can support from your foundation.
Oh, fantastic. Mm-hmm. So you'd mentioned now that U.S. Universities, I'm assuming that most Canadian universities would have something very similar as well?
Oh, every Canadian university is a qualified donee, yes. They generally have their own foundation as well.
Oh, interesting.
So your foundation can give to that. So a registered charity in Canada is either a charitable organization or a foundation.
Okay.
And the foundation can be private or public. So there's almost 90,000 of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So lots of choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Now I'm assuming there's certain specific niches, so to speak, in a lot of those 90,000 as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So that's fantastic. Well, thanks a lot for that, Denise. That's fantastic.
So we're here to make your giving easy and interesting and rewarding for you as the funder, but also adding value to the charitable recipients as well.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's all about getting the money across to where it can be used effectively.
Yes, and used effectively, yes.
Now, I'm assuming that used effectively sometimes comes into a, let's call it a bad light, so to speak, with people that don't understand. I've had conversations and a few people have said things, because we decided to go with our own foundation as opposed to building something inside of through, as an example, the Canadian Cancer Society, just for using them as an example. Nothing wrong that they don't do anything bad or anything like that, but what the intention and what we're trying to accomplish with this whole Cancer Survival Walk is to raise that money so that it's not just a once and done sort of thing. So now with the help of Canada Gives, we're going to have that money that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to go out and donate some money year over year and fund projects that are in essence what we're trying to accomplish is that elimination of cancer and helping individuals live with and cope on that journey with their on their journey with cancer. So that's fantastic. If we were to partner with somebody like, say, the Terry Fox Foundation, who does fantastic work, the Canadian Cancer Society, a lot of different things like that, the money goes to them, and then in essence we don't lose control, but it's sort of a once and done where the money now isn't going to continue on. And what my intention was with this was so that not only myself but my children and my grandchildren and their grandchildren can now have some impact moving forward, so that we can keep this money rolling ahead, and instead of just being a once and done lump of in an example, when we do hit our target goal of 100 million, that 100 million has gone to do some fantastic things, but over the course of time, but depending on growth and depending on returns, that 100 million could turn into going back to the charitable sector in the tune of 300 to 500 million.
Yes, it could. Yes, very much so. Absolutely. That's very terrific. Yeah, that's really adding a great value to the not-for-profit sector. But I mean, you're right, Jimmy. There is essentially a shift in control over how that money is dispersed and managed, and it shifts from the recipient charity to the funder. So if you set up a foundation, you maintain more control over how much money you give away, when you give it. If you're happy with progress that the charity is making, then you're going to give them more. You're going to be able to work with them on a longer period of time and see some results and make a bigger impact on their programs. But it also gives you the flexibility to, if that program changes or that charity changes, or you discover a new charity that's more in line with your goals and objectives, that you have the flexibility and control to change where your funding goes, to add more funding, to change its direction. So it really is a very different experience than one-time gift.
You're absolutely right, and that's a fantastic point, and thanks for bringing that up, Denise, because that was one of the challenges that I faced is with doing this event. I wanted to make sure that the money was going to go somewhere that's going to make a difference.
Yes.
So I'm going to, and us as a family, we're going to be making sure that we research and we are going into and funding programs that are making a difference. So this money is not just going to go, go to waste. There's sort of an interesting mentality in and around the whole fundraising sort of thing that it just goes to, pay for the top CEOs and pay for all their expenses and such. So I'm very, very much an entrepreneur, very, very conscious when it comes to money. So the money and the donations and the program funding that we're going to be doing through the Lefebvre Foundation is going to be making sure that those programs are causing some initiative and getting results. So that's a fantastic point. So thank you very much for that. And that control piece is definitely fantastic. And I know we've had discussions with it previously in the past, yourself and me, based on, obviously Canada Gives has to charge something for the services that they offer. But from what I've found in the charitable and the not-for-profit and the foundation community and arena, your fees are very, very, very reasonable. And if you want to touch on that just for a little bit, Denise, please, by all means.
Well, and coming from the financial services sector, we're conscious of that. And because we're a registered charity, we are not-for-profit. There's no share capital here, so there's no way that we're going to make money and keep it. So we are here to keep our fees as low as possible and still give the most customized professional service we can give to you. So essentially our fees go, around 1% or a lot less. After your $1 million or two, it drops down to 0.75%, then it drops down to 0.5%, and we shave it as slim as we can in order to provide the service that we need to provide and to make sure that money is available for the gifts that you want to make to charities. So
absolutely,
that's the focus we take, is to be skinny in our costs.
That's a great way to say it, for sure. And as everybody out there watching is going to be aware, if you limit that fee, obviously there's more to give back. So that, or sorry, not limit, but reduce that fee, there's more to give back. So in essence, think about it, everyone, when you're thinking about your taxes, right? If you were to pay, instead of paying 40% marginal tax rate, if you were to pay 25% or even 10%, that extra 30% that you get to save or keep as income can now make that much of a bigger difference. So when we're talking on what Denise is speaking on, sometimes it's up to 5%, whereas what Canada Gives is, if we're down at that, depending on how much the fund is sitting at, but if we're down at 0.5%, that's a 4.5% difference that the fund is able to then dole out and to donate and to fund programs and charitable organizations that makes that much bigger of a difference. So to put that in a little bit of a perspective, from 5% to 0.5%, when we're looking at that $100 million target, that's $4.5 million a year that can additional funds that can go out to fund projects. So that is phenomenal, Denise, that you guys are able to, and Canada Gives is able to come in with those sort of fees. That's just mind-blowing.
Well, we do our best here. I mean, we have bills to pay, but we do our best to keep it as low as possible.
Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. So just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up, and the reason why I wanted to get on this call with Denise is just for a little bit of a comfort level, so to speak, as well, so that we all know that the money that's coming in through the Lefebvre Foundation, coming in through one of our other partners through Canada Helps, is they're the ones that are doing the tax receipts and such, and the money that's coming in here. And what we're doing with the money, if you want to follow along, you can definitely do that as well at thelfoundation.ca. There's options to check things out there, to follow along what we're doing. Anytime we're doing donations, we're going to make sure we post it on there, and the blog is going to be active here on there as well, so you can keep in touch you can keep up to speed with what's going on and where the money's going. So it keeps me and us accountable also, because from the great support of all the wonderful people in Canada and everybody else, friends and family and such, that it's going to make sure that things are going to the proper sources. So I thank you very much for that, Denise. That's fantastic. Thanks for taking that initiative and getting that done. It's rather interesting to see. And I've made mention of this before, but to talk to somebody that has that same entrepreneurial mindset, but brings it to the not-for-profit sector and for the charitable sector is rather interesting, because I've had a few discussions with some other organizations and a few other groups as well that didn't seem to have the same drive to try to make a difference and try to make a change. They were sort of very, very bottled and very stuck into the grooves that they were in, so to speak. So I appreciate the insight, and I definitely appreciate the refreshness of and the freshness of being able to deal with somebody like yourself and Canada Gives and the great things that you guys are doing as well. Now, can you talk to us a little bit, Denise, on some of the things that Canada Gives does on a charitable basis? Because I know you do have a foundation yourselves that it's not just for for individuals like myself or other families and such, but what is some of the things that Canada Gives does and Canada Gives funds for projects and such?
Well, we do see ourselves as facilitators as opposed to having our own charitable programs that would in any way conflict with what you want to do as a funder. So really our position here is to facilitate charitable giving and to support the objectives and goals of our donors. But we did in 2012 expand our objectives so that we could help Canadian donors and even other Canadian foundations support foreign charitable activities. Because unusually so, CRA is very strict about money leaving Canada, charitable money going to outside of Canadian registered charities. And I mean, they're not unwise to take that position, because particularly in developing countries, there's a lot of reasons to be nervous about how your charitable money is being spent and is it being spent well. So we went to CRA and expanded our objectives so that we could help Canadian donors give outside of Canada when there's no Canadian charity there, first of all, and get a tax receipt. And secondly, if it's a Canadian foundation, legally you cannot give your foundation money if it's not a registered charity or a qualified donee, as I had mentioned earlier. So what we did is say to CRA, we would like to be able to set up projects for the relief of poverty in developing countries, and that can be healthcare, education, economic development, whatever, anything that will contribute to the relief of poverty. And so we've helped Canadian funders, other foundations and donors do that. And it's a very rewarding area. It's a much more complex area to work in because you have to prove to CRA that you have direction and control in these projects. You have to set up legal contracts and budgets and milestones for the projects. You can't release all the money at once. You have to essentially pay bills, and you have to show that those bills are being paid properly and for the right amount of money, and get receipts and then fund some more. But in saying that, we've been able to help Canadians build schools in the Congo, build medical facilities in Honduras, do microfinance projects in Rwanda. We've involved in a lot of chicken farms in Mozambique. And so there's lots of different ways to make a difference. And if it's a passion for somebody, if they really would like to have a certain goal in mind and there's no Canadian charity to work with, we can help them to do that by setting up a customized project.
Well, that's fantastic.
It's very rewarding. It's very, very rewarding, I have to say.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Thanks for that, Denise. I mean, it just goes to show, again, that depth and breadth that Canada Gives is able to offer, not only just for for a project like we're looking at with the Cancer Survival Walk, but like you said, to end poverty and hunger in other developing countries. That is absolutely mind-blowing. That's phenomenal. So you, in essence, work with that donor to fund that project or to work
Yes.
on that project and set and structure that project properly so that it falls underneath the guidelines and all the rest of that as well. Keep CRA and still make sure that money goes to those let's call them passion projects, if you will.
Ah, that's a good way to describe it, Jimmy. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, that is absolutely mind-blowing. That's fantastic that Canada Gives is expanding into something like that, because I know that is a conversation that I've had with quite a few individuals as well, and things that they're very, very passionate about. But when they start looking at things, when they start getting down that path, when they start opening up that can of worms, so to speak, to try to do it on their own, it turns into a real big challenge. And more times than not, I've seen people just back away from it because of the hassles, because of the challenges, because of the things that, the rules and regulations that are coming into play with that. And
Yeah.
again, sending money out of Canada, we want to make sure that the money is getting used appropriately and properly to actually fund those passion projects and to make that difference. So the fact that Canada Gives is able to do that that's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. Yes, there are many things to worry about. I mean, there's lots of needs out there, but if the money's not getting where it's needed, what's the point? So if we can help
Absolutely.
do that, yeah.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Anything else you'd like to add, Denise, before we kind of wrap up?
Well, there's one thing that we offered. The donor advised fund structure is essentially a separate account under our registration, and it means that people who have foundations with us their financial information and their activity is completely private. Not because CRA, if you registered your own foundation directly with CRA as opposed to using our donor advised fund, anybody can look up your foundation and find out how much money you put in, where you've spent it, who the directors are, and can be solicited then by 90,000 charities. So often people don't want that. They don't like that sort of lack of privacy, and they like to control the information that's out there, especially if they're private family foundations. But one thing that we felt people were losing the benefit of was being known to charities, to the charitable sector in a way that is of interest to both sides. So if you are, you will have your focus, Jimmy, down the way that you may have special programs or special interests, and you would invite charities to make a written request to your foundation and describe the programs and how they're going to spend the money and what the outcomes are going to be, and is it a 5-year commitment, is it a 4-year, is it a 25-year commitment, any other funders that are there. If you want to know all of that information in order to really engage in a meaningful way in a partnership with a charity, that process, it was not available to donor advised fund foundations until and I thought that was a benefit to funders that they were missing by having a donor advised fund. So I approached Imagine Canada, who has a directory of foundations called Grant Connect, and said, listen, for our foundation clients that are interested, could they be listed in your directory? And they said, yes, of course, that would be wonderful. So we bring that service at no cost to our foundation clients, and we'll share that with you, Jimmy, when you're ready. That you can describe your foundation and its funding interests, the kinds of programs you'll fund, the kind that you don't want to fund, and invite written applications from charities that fit your interests and get a lot more closely aligned with the ones that match up with what you want to do. And I think that's an important part of being a foundation funder that you miss out on in being just an individual donor. It's a benefit to being a foundation funder, and we want our clients who want that to be able to do that. So that's an initiative that we started 2 years ago with Imagine Canada, and it's been it's brought a lot of benefit to both the charities and to the foundation clients.
I can absolutely imagine it would have, and that's actually I'm glad that you brought up that point. Two things. One, the privacy, because that is absolutely phenomenal, because not everybody wants to know, not everybody wants to have public access to the things that they're doing especially when it's a family foundation, so to speak.
Yes.
It's not necessarily that we do it because we want recognition, or we do it because we want our name in lights. We do it because we want to try to give back and try to help. And sometimes that anonymity is fantastic from a privacy. However, the beautiful thing that you've got set up with Imagine Canada was actually one of the concerns that I have, so I'm glad that you mentioned it now, is because of there being 90,000 charitable organizations in Canada alone, how do we go about deciding where this funding is going to go? So I truly appreciate you mentioning that, because that was actually one thing that we hadn't discussed as of yet. But that sure eliminates and streamlines, my ability to now go out and sort of specialize, I guess, instead of, for us, it's going to be in the cancer realm, but now instead of having to go look at 90,000, now the pool kind of shortens up to maybe inside the cancer. I would still say there's probably going to be close to 5,000 to 10,000, I would think, but it gives us the ability to sort of filter that a little bit. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Can you just touch a little bit on the anonymity piece too? You know, let's say for an example, we have somebody that decides that well, they want to come in for a $10,000 or $100,000 donation to the foundation, to the Lefebvre Foundation,
Right.
either Canada Gives or who the other partner, Canada Helps. Now that donation or that donor can also be very, very anonymous. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So you have that donor has the choice of being anonymous or being publicly known. And you would make that as the foundation person, account holder, Jimmy, you would make that decision with
Mm-hmm.
them. But that is also the benefit on the other side using the donor advised fund structure is that you have the choice of being anonymous anytime you want to be.
Absolutely. That's
Nobody
fantastic.
can find you.
Well,
Only unless you choose to be found,
yeah,
unless you choose to be publicly known.
which is fantastic as well. And
Yeah.
that brings me around to another point. I mean, all of the donors up to date inside of our foundation, I have their names. That's the only thing I have. I don't have contact info. I don't have any of that sort of stuff. So the privacy piece of this is very, very, very important as well. And I want to make sure that I stress that all of somebody's contact information, it's not going into an email spam list. It's not going anywhere else. It does stay
Right.
very, very private. And
Yeah.
if you choose that you want to stay anonymous, then that is
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic as well. So
Yes.
that's a great point. Now, I just want to touch on briefly the ability that we had and the speed that you guys at Canada Gives have to get this all organized and set up. Now, obviously, we spend a little bit of time on the phone and back and forth via email, but the ability and the speed that Canada Gives has to get something set up was absolutely mind-blowing to me. I mean, it was a very, very simple application in the sense of a donor-advised fund, obviously. And I believe it was within the day when you'd emailed me back and said everything was active. So can you
That's
touch
correct.
on that just a little bit, Denise, just to kind of fill the audience in?
Well, again, because the donor advised fund is a separate account within an already registered public foundation, there's no need to have any legal time or costs involved. It's a matter of us taking your information and setting you up on our system, and it can happen very easily in the same day. There's no cost to do that. So it's meant to be simple for you. We've done all the work behind the scenes so that you can start whenever you want to start and your foundation can be active in a day.
That's fantastic. Absolutely mind-blowing. It was truly mind-blowing to me because I know I'd been working on this for about 3 months and hadn't really gotten anywhere with any other organizations that I was looking at trying to work with. And when I came across your stuff, it's been great. So I truly appreciate that, Denise.
Well,
Now,
thank you, Jimmy. Yes, I have to tell you, one of our early donors was a lovely lady, and she said to me, Denise, I'm going to tell my friends about Canada Gives because you take the pain out of being generous. And I think that's what we like to do is take the pain out of being generous.
absolutely, that is extremely well put, Denise, because you're absolutely right. I mean, when we want to do these sort of philanthropic things, when we want to give back, when we want to try to help, whether it's me, whether it's somebody else, whether it's a family, whether it's a generation, whatever that is, if we can do it as painless as possible and as streamlined as possible, because I know myself, I'm not an expert in the charitable sector. I'm not an expert in the CRA rules. I'm not an expert in that. So Canada Gives really takes that expertise and they oversee and they help with that. So all it's a matter of doing is just trying to put both of the pieces together. And you're absolutely right. You take the pain out of being generous. Absolutely, it's an extremely painless process. And your organization has been absolutely phenomenal to work with thus far, and I'm looking forward to continuing the relationship as well for many, many years into the future.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. We're looking forward to you starting and continuing your journey, and your goals are really remarkable and quite laudable. So we're behind you 101% here and cheering you along the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. May 1st, we'll be hitting the road, which happens to wind up being next Tuesday. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful day, and the snow is disappearing soon or quickly. So I'm very thankful and very fortunate for that. But with that being said, Denise, how can people get more information on Canada Gives? How can they find out more about you?
Well, thank you, Jimmy. It's canadagives.ca, and
Okay.
it's all there on our website.
Fantastic. Phone number, contact info, all that sort of stuff is there as well from my understanding. And your website is very, very user friendly. It's very I don't want to say simplistic in the sense of simplistic, but it's very descriptive of what can be done. And again, it's painless to go through that website and understand some of the options that we have as donors as well. So, congratulations on that as well. So CanadaGives.ca is a great place for some resources. If you'd like to get in touch with Canada Gives or Denise, please reach out to that. And that being the case, I will wrap up here, Denise. So thank you very, very much for that. And you guys can follow us along the journey at thelfoundation.ca or check us out on Facebook at the Lefebvre Foundation. And we'll have some great stuff going on there. The blog is going to be active on the website. There's going to be pictures. There's going to be all sorts of stuff on Facebook as well. All sorts of stuff on the website. And if you are looking to make a donation or interested in making a donation, we have partnered up with Canada Helps, who is another, not an entity of, but another great organization inside of the charitable sector that processes all the donations that are made via online. So if you're interested in that, check us out at thelfoundation.ca, and you can go on there and there's a spot for donations, which will take you to the Canada Helps page, and you'll get an instant tax receipt as well, emailed directly to you. So with that being said, May 1st is coming up here, 5,716 kilometers. We are going to pick up the motorhome this week. Knuckles and all that sort of stuff is going to be loaded up all over it. We got to get loaded up, and we're going to an interesting event this weekend also. So it's going to be a phenomenal last week at home. Getting the kids all loaded up, getting everything packed up. It's going to be just absolutely great. But with that being the case, thelfoundation.ca, you can check us out. If you have any comments or any questions, please email me at hello@thelfoundation.ca. So that's hello, HELLO, at thelfoundation.ca, and you can get in touch with me there, or leave us a message on Facebook, or email, or via the website. That'd be fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again, Denise, for spending some time with us today and being on the call. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the video working, but the audio should be right on point. So thank you very much for that, Denise, and we look forward to chatting with you very soon.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good luck to you.
Excellent. Thank you.